do the first of two shiurim in Siman Kuf Chav Beis. Siman Kuf Chav Beis deals also with the Yeseides Dikasugin Nechas Gitin, which is, when do we say that Kvar Osu Shlichusayu, the Sefer, the Eidim, and the Shliach already fulfilled what they were appointed to do by the husband, and therefore they can no longer write a new get if something happens to the get? And when do we say that their Shlichus is still pending and they can continue doing their work and write a new get? The Gemara, it's a Gemara in Gitin of Samach Gimel Amud Beis. There was a woman, her name was Nefasa, Nun Fei Aleph Taf Hey, and he told her that they should write a get, and instead of writing a nun in the beginning, they wrote a taf in the beginning. Instead of nafata, they wrote tafata. And the Eidim left. And now comes Rav Yitzchak and says, Yitzchak bar Shmuel, bar Martin, name of Rav, they already did their shluchas and they cannot write a new get with fixing the name unless the husband gave a new tzivui. The first shluchas is completely batal. They can't do the shluchas a second time after the shluchas was already done. That's, if you look in the read, that's how he explains it on the side. Rabba right away asks a question to this Rav Yitzchak. Did he tell them to write a chaspa ba'alma, a piece of broken clay? He obviously was not interested in them just giving her something which is completely useless. He wanted her to receive a kosher get. And therefore, they still did not fulfill their shlichus, and therefore they could write a new get. But if it was written and it got lost before it was given to her, then we say that the Sefer and the Eidim already did their shluchus because they already gave a kosher get. That's how Rabbah explains it. This is based on the way Rashi explains it in the Gemara over there. Rav Nachman then comes and asks a question on it. What does it mean that if they lost it, they could give another get? They can't give another get. Obviously, when he appointed them to give a get, he wanted her to receive a kosher get. He didn't mean that they should write a get and keep it in their pockets, and therefore their shluchus was not yet fulfilled, and therefore until the get comes to her hands, their shluchus was not completed, and they could write even 100 gitin. Comes a bit, this is the Gemara. The Beis Yosef then discusses this over there, brings a shit of Tosfos. If the get was not lost, but there is a suffix if it was done, if it was properly done or not, you can't make another get just mitzad a suffix. Why? Because we have a suffix. Yeah. He says if it's not lost, but there's a suffix if it was done properly or not. That means the get was written. It's not a get bottle or pass. It's a suffix if it was done properly or not. Then you can't write a new get mitzad a suffix, because ultimately you don't know. Maybe they did mekayim the shluchas, but they weren't mekayim the shluchas because we don't know if the get is kosher or not. The suffix on the get. So the suffix if they were mekayim their shluchas or not. And therefore, he says, to solve the problem, tell the husband to tell the Eidim that they should do whatever they want until they have no doubt. That is Shita 3. The Beis Yosef continues and brings the Shita of the Rosh. The Rosh also says the Maskana is like Rav Nachman, that he could write a bunch of times. But if there is a suffix mitzad chumris, that means not Safek Medina, but Mitzad Chumras that they were noyeg to be Machmir. And these Chumras don't have Iker V'Shoyresh Min HaTorah. The Eidim already fulfilled their mission. Why? Because the get is kosher b'deraisa, should be Gureshes. Therefore, the husband should, therefore he says the husband, when he appoints a sefer and the eidim, should tell the sefer and the eidim very clearly, you should write a get until a get is kosher with, to your opinion, you, that means the sefer and the eidim, without any suffix, and you have no doubts whatsoever. So therefore, they will have a long-term appointment to make sure the get is completely...
Why can't you just give another get and make it nice?
The husband is not there.
No, make another get and make it nice. If the first get was kosher, so then...
Because how can you write the second one?
You write the second one. If the first one was puzzle, so you're writing a second one, and the first one was kosher, and then it's nothing.
I don't know. I don't know why. Usually we're trying to get away from writing two גיטין בכלל, which we're going to get to soon. The Beis Yosef continues and says that what's implied from the Rosh over here, from the shit of the Rosh, is that if it says mitzat kama chumras be'alma, we have a suffix. So that means that if it's batel or midiraisa, or even pasul midirabanan be'oifen vadoi, and there is no doubt that it's batel or pasul, being that even a get which is pasul midirabanan has a ikar v'sheire shmina toira, and not stam chumras, so they have no problem to write another get. Why? Because ultimately we go back to the chaspa ba'alma, the piece of clay. For her, this is a chaspa ba'alma. Why is it a chaspa ba'alma? Chaspa ba'alma means something which you have absolutely no use for. You can't even use it to cover a bottle. That's the definition. So you have a get. What's the purpose of a get? You should be able to get remarried. If a get is possible with rabbanon, she obviously has no purpose. She can't use this get for anything. She can't use the get for anything. For her, it's a chaspa ba'alma. So what does it make a difference if it's possible with bottom with the rice or possible with the rabbanon? Regardless of which way it is, for her it's still chaspa ba'alma. So therefore, mele, if it's at kama chumras, you could start arguing. It's not really chaspa ba'alma. If she gets married, it's not going to be a problem, because ultimately it's kosher. Sami deraisa, sami derabbanan is only certain chumras. But if it's really possible, completely bottle, then it becomes a problem, and they can't write another get. The Mittler Rebbe, when he summarizes the Beis Yosef, adds over here another line in parentheses. That's what seems like he rephrases it a little bit. That it's mashma that if it's a suffix, if it's possible midrabanan, not stam chumra, but it becomes a suffix if it's possible midrabanan, because the Teis is talking about suffix bottle, not suffix possible, because based on the way the Beis Yosef writes that it's vadai. Still a suffix if also shlichusam or not, and therefore they should not write another get without a tzivui habal, according to the shitta of the Rosh. But this continues, the same thing is also in the Rambam, that if it's pasul or bottle, you write another get. There's no difference if it's a pasul midrabanan or bottle midiraisa. Regardless, the Rambam paskins, you can write a new get. Obviously, we're talking about when it's vadai pasul or vadai bottle. Sefer HaTruman Smag, then they say that it's important that the husband should tell the sefer and the eidim that they should write and they should sign until it is kosher ledas harav hamisader, which is a nusach that we use today in גיטין, when the minui, or the rav of the city, and ledai tom, that means the das of the sefer and the eidim, because they're the ones that have the shlichus, and ledas everyone, hein bechsive, hein bechsime, where it should be kosher, side the writing, side the signing, and the way today, it's also the nusach is a little bit different, but the idea is the same, that until it's kosher to you, in your opinion, the opinion of the Rav Mesader, sai bechsive, sai bechsime. That is, then he brings from the Kuntreisim, the name of Rabbeinu Yechiel and Rav Yosef Kalchan, that we should not do like the Shitta of Ri, which based on the Shitta of Ri, when there's a suffix in the Taisus, the Shitta of Ri in Taisus, if there's a suffix, then you have to write, you get the husband to write a second get. Why? Because then, if you're going to go according to the Shitta of Ri, you're going to get into a problem. If you're going to give to גיטין, because you're not sure which one is good, you have a shaylev, yesh breira, ein breira. Do we say that it's nivra, nisbarer, l'mafred, we say yesh breira, or ein b'reira, do we say there's that if when you have two and you could clarify lemafreya which one the husband's intention was on, which one is kosher, or maybe his kavanah was on the first one and the second one was really kosher. His kavanah was the second one, the first one was really kosher. We're not sure which one the intention was on, and therefore it became, and therefore lav dafka she's meguresh machlekes. So he says, Ri holds yesh breira, and therefore the husband could go. Therefore, the husband could say, write a bunch of gitin, and he could appoint to write more gitin, and therefore you're going to write more gitin when you say, you could tell them, write as many gitin as needed until one is kosher l'daitachem. But according to Rabbeinu Tam that holds it ein breira b'deiraisa, that you can't say this din of breira, that you're going to determine afterwards in Afreya which one is the good one, you have a problem, and therefore the husband can't just give one general appointment before he starts and tell them write as many gittin as you want until you're comfortable. Rather, he has to give a new minui before every time. And that is the kolben dagos Mordechai. The Maisa today we do both. Sai, he says write as many gittin as possible. And Sai, if the husband is still there, if it's a serious, if it's a suffix, we'll obviously pull the husband back in to make a new minui. Lemaise, that goes Mordechai, even though he holds the other way, he says Lemaise, the minig is to follow, is paskin like Ri, that you tell the husband to do it. And Darkei Moshe says Yeshlachu sh'shita v'Rabbeinu Tam kol echad ha'efshar, and that's why we still try to get the husband to do a new minui. The Beis Yosef then continues, brings a tshuva of the Rashba. The Rashba says when there was a get from an Arusa, and Arusa is not in the Suan, you wrote the Havas Intasi, and Havas Intasi is not true. The get is kosher, and the Eidim could write another get if they want. And they don't need more reshus from the husband, because the husband told them to write a kosher get. He didn't tell them to write a get pasul, didn't tell them to write a get, which is a suffix. That means that's the shit of the Rashba. That Mittler Rebbe right away points out to you that it is not like Tosfos and not like the Rosh, that they hold that when you have a suffix you cannot write another get. Over here they could write another get even though there is a suffix. That's the mashmos of the Rashba. Still no writes the Rashba that even you could write a second get. When they give a get to the wife, they should give her both gittin, and she will get divorced, whichever one is kosher. Because if you're going to say that the first one is kosher, then the Rashba says it. Then she was nisgaresh and also shlichutן. And if the second one is kosher and the first one was pasul, then she's nisgaresh with the second one, and that's when they do the shluchas. The same thing is in Chuvas Aramban, give it to Gitin. If you only give her the second one, maybe the first one was kosher, and then no longer shluchim on the second one, and the Eidim are only Eidim on the first one and not on the second one, and then it doesn't work. But when she gets both, the Ramban says she's nisgaresh from whichever one is kosher. Obviously, this is talking about when the husband says that tnu get leishti, not get ze. If he says lahoylech get ze, specifically, you can't go and write a new get and deliver it to her. Maybe even if also shlichusam regarding the writing. But if he says lahoylech get ze, this specific get, when he's there by the time of the end of the writing of the get, it becomes a problem if this get is possible, because they can't then go and deliver another get. Therefore, again, by the Sidrei Gitin today, you'll see that first, in the way they do it today, first if the husband leaves, or if the husband is appointing a shliach to deliver the get, then before the get is written, he says, "Uchsoiv get get leishti," to be deliver a get to my wife. If it's in English, you say a get. And after the get is written and it's checked by the Rav and it's all kosher and it's signed and the signatures are checked and it's all perfect, then the husband takes the get, which is his, gives it to the shliach, and gives him a second minui, repeats everything again, lahoilach get zeh, this get. So therefore you don't come into the problems. If he says lahoilach get zeh in the beginning, before he writes, then you have a problem of a get, you have to do all the minuim again. If the husband's not there, you have a problem. The Beis Yosef continues and finalizes the base in these two tshuvas of the Rashba and the Ramban. What the Tosfos says, that the husband has to say, you should, to the Eidim and to the Sefer, write as many gittin as you want until you're comfortable with it, is only for the issue of preventing two gittin. It's only l'raf chadamilsa. But it doesn't mean that you can't have two gittin. That's what the Rashba understands. It's based on that's how the Beis Yosef understands the Rashba and the Ramban. Then the Beis Yosef brings another tshuva from the Rashbatz. That, another important point, when do we say asu shlichusam? When it's written and signed. That means it says kisvu tenu, and the Beis Yosef l'shitase, the Rashbatz l'shitase, kisvu includes chismu, which we discussed a couple shiurim ago. But if it was written and it was not signed yet, the shlichus was not completed, and we cannot say asu shlichusam. And even if one aid signed and the other aid did not sign yet, it's still considered that it was not completely signed yet. And therefore, you could still redo the get, even if it's a scenario where otherwise it would be asu shlichusam. But if there is the kisvu and it was not completed, the ksiv and the chsim, it's considered as if it wasn't signed. The Tashbetz, the Rashbatz also says that if the husband says, instead of using the nusach harogel, another din of the Rashbatz, if he doesn't use the nusach harogel, achiyeh kosher, l'daitachem, l'datarav, mesader, v'chulu v'chulu, but if he tells them achiyeh kosher, ketakonas chazal, it's still the same thing. That means that until the Eidim and the Sefer are comfortable, this is like Tikkun Chachamenu. That is pretty much a summary of the Beis Yosef. Based on this, you have the Sa'if Aleph in Shulchan Aruch, that a husband who tells the Eidim and the Sefer, write, sign, and give a get to my wife, and they wrote, signed, and gave, and then afterwards it became pasul. And obviously the Bishmul right away brings you from the Beis Yosef. What is it talking about over here? That even if it's pasul only midarabanan, means bottle or pasul, but not if it's stam mitzat chumre. Or the Mechaber continues, if they wrote and they signed and they got lost before it came to her, they can write a new get. If it didn't get lost, but there's a suffix, it's only a suffix if it's kosher, or not vadai that it's lost, or vadai that it's pasul, then we have then also shlichusam. We say that the shlichus is already fulfilled, and the husband has to reappoint them. On that comes the Ramah, and he brings the shitta of the Rashba, which is brought into Beis Yosef, that if they want, in such a case when it's a suffix, they can write a second get without the appointment of the husband and give her both, and give both to the woman. That is what the Ramah says, and the Bishmul and Sifkot Beis right away tells you writing to Gittin is problematic. If you want to know where it is, the Bishmul tells you, look, later on, I'm going to discuss it in Siman Kuf Chavtes, where it's talking about the dinim of writing names, which is where when you have a suffix on how to write a name, that's when it becomes a shaila whether you should write to Gittin or not. So Bishmul tells you, go look at what I wrote in Siman Kuf Chavtes. I give a bunch of reasons why you should not write to Gittin. If you look in Kuf Chavtes and Sifkot Lamed Ches, over there, the Mechaber says that if you test in Kuf Chavtes, the Mechaber says that if you give two Gittin, you should not give them both in one shot, but rather not give them both in one shot, but one after another. And the Beis Shmuel gives you 4 reasons why there should not be two Gittin given in one shot. Number 1, maybe the husband's intention from the 2 Gittin, which one he thinks is kosher, is punkt the one that is bepoil lahalocha, not kosher. Second one, even if he has both of them in mind, we have a shaila if yesh breira ein breira in the get. Third reason is the pasuk says a sefer krisus, not sifrei krisus, not multiples. And fourth, shaila of chatzitza, because it has to be v'nosan biyada. If the not kosher one touches her hand first, is two are together, and she grabs onto the not kosher one, so the kosher one never touched her hand. So it becomes a shayla. Those are 4 reasons. Therefore, he says, therefore the Bishmul, that's what the Bishmul gives these four reasons over there. He sends you from Kuf Chav Beis to Kuf Chav Tes to look over there, basically telling you, look over there and you'll know why you should not. What the Rama over here says the name of the Rashba is not exactly the ideal way of doing it. Okay. But so then there's a way of not giving it together. When you have to give to גיטין, the way that it's done, first of all, we're nimna from giving to גיטין b'chlal. Today. I'm telling you the Maisa. When do you write to, and when you have to give to גיטין, you don't even tell the husband that you're writing to גיטין, that you're giving to גיטין. You give him one get, and then he gives the get to the wife without any shilas on the get, and then you write the second get, and that second get has the name that the other way that's supposed to be written, and then he gives the second get, and you don't tell him maybe the first one was possible. You tell him, give another get. Every next one he says the whole thing again. He says the get zek all times? No, that's for the shliach leilach or something else. I'm talking about when he gives it miyad liyad. There's two separate ones. By a minu, you get zeh, it's get zeh and get zeh, yeah. The Rama over there in Kuf Chav Tes, if you test, as on the Mechaber, exactly the opposite of what he writes over here. He says you should not give to גיטין unless it's doichak. And before a get is given, it should be shown to the Rav, and he should decide which one is better. And each one should have its own Seder get. And the Rav should explain to the people who are there why are 2 גיטין given. That's all from Kuf Chav Tes. The Bishmul tells you, go look what I wrote over there. So summarize, see what it says over there. Comes back to Bishmul, verse of Cotton Beis. It says, because of this, that's why the Poskim say that you have to tell, the husband has to say, Ad meya גיטין. And it is for the reason that you should not have to give 2 גיטין. Not like the Beis Yosef says that it's stam, that it's to avoid the need for it, but you could if you want to. That's not the reason. But probably you want to avoid giving 2 גיטין. Then the Mechaber continues, if the husband leaves town, that means he appoints and it's nechpaz lotzis, it's called in the halacha, get of nechpaz. That's how it's in the Sidre גיטין, you look at Seder get of nechpaz lotzis, that if the husband leaves town, he should tell the Eidim and the Sefer that he gives them reshus to write and sign up to 100 גיטין until one is kosher, bechsiva, vechsima, according to the das of the Rav Ha'ir, without any kind of pickpoke whatsoever, and to anybody who he will show it to. Not only to the Rav Ha'ir, but the Rama adds, even to anybody who he will show it to. Now, why does he have to say Beli Shum Pikpuk? The Taz tells you right over here, this is the main part of the heter that you can write a bunch of גיטין together. Because if he only says Kisvut Nu until 100, and he doesn't say Achei Kasher Beli Shum Pikpuk, you become into a problem. If something has a suffix only mitzat kama chumrus, and you want to write a new get, they're not comfortable giving this get, they're going to be stuck, and the husband's not there anymore. So therefore, the Taz says the ikar of this sentence is not the kisvu to know ad meya גיטין. His kiss is the Beli Shum Pikpuk, is that there's absolutely no suffix on it whatsoever. Otherwise, it becomes a shaila if asu shlichusam or not. Now, not only the Rav Ha'ir, and not only the Chol Sheyar Eloi, like the Rama adds, the Bishmul tells you right away, in the name of the Darkei Moshe, means the name of the Rama also says Sefer and the Eidim. They're the main guys over here. They're the ones who are going to have to do it. And the reason for it is, there should also be kosher Beli Shum Pikpuk according to them. Why? Because if it's going to be kosher Beli Shum Pikpuk l'das harav, or if there's only a suffix l'das harav, not l'das hasofer, becomes a shaila if there's something that the Rav wants to fix. Could the Sefer do it or not? Because for him it was already kosher Beli Shum Pikpuk. So therefore, when you do this, either if the Sefer finds an issue before the Rav sees it, and it has to be Beli Shum Pikpuk to the Sefer could fix it. Without the reshus from the Rav, he could make the letters longer. He could maybe if there's if there's a crack, the hairline crack in a letter or something of the sort, where it's only a chumrah to make sure that it's like that, then when it's a clear crack, it's medina, but when it's a mamash a hairline crack that you can't see it without, and it's only a chumrah to make sure that it's perfect. And then Amar then continues, he says, this whole thing of nechbaz, you should not rely on if the husband is in town. Rather, every single time when there is a need to write a new get, the husband should go and reappoint the sefer and the edim like the first time, and he should reacquire the niyar and the dioy and everything else. Now, why should we not rely on this if the husband is in town? That's what the Ramah says. The Bishmul right away tells you, because according to the one that holds mitzad the issue of ein breira, it's not so clear if the get which the Rav is machshir from all the gitin that were written is the one that the husband had in mind. And the Bishmul also said you should not give two gittin together if the husband is in town. And he continues, all this is only if the get is not pasul medina. But if it's pasul medina, you don't need a new tzivui. Obviously, that's straight from the Gemara, because the shlichus is not completed. But he says the minhag is that the husband still, even when it's completely pasul, the husband still reappoints every single time. And the Seder HaGet, which is in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, not the Seder HaGet of Maram Riva, the Seder HaGet of the Shulchan Aruch, with the Mechaber and the Ramah, which is right after Siman Kuf, towards by the end of Ilchus Gitin. Over there in Siftes Vav, the Ramah says that you should be makne, dioy, and klaf again, but if it's completely pasul, you don't have to be makne, because there is a pidin, you don't need a new tzivui, and it's only a chumrah to be makne again. Now, the Taz over here adds, and this is something which is then written in later, in all the later poskim, that being that there might be a need to write more than one get, so Meikara, the Sefer, should originally be makna to him much more than what is needed. So if you ever see a get, he doesn't give him one piece of paper, he gives him the whole bag, the whole package, which has ink and quills and paper and everything else, whatever he needs. So even if he needs to, he doesn't have to be makna, he doesn't have to give him one piece of paper and tell him this is the piece of paper I'm writing a get on. But in the bag he has 10, 12, 15 pieces of paper, and then if there's going to be a need to write a new get, it'll be enough. That's what Taz over here says. Now the Pri Chodesh comes over here and gives you something which we're later, hopefully today we're going to get to it. We're going to get to it if there's a Pri Chodesh, a get Poshet, a Teras Gitin, and a bunch of Tzemach Tzedeks. What's the din of Nevad if Ibdu B'Yodayim? If the Eidim went and actually destroyed the get. So the Pri Chodesh right away says, Nevad doesn't mean only Nevad Me'atzmi, that it got lost by itself, but rather even if the Eidim actually went ahead and destroyed the get. They can still write a new one. And even if they have a kosher get in their hands, 100% kosher get, but they didn't give it to her yet, they can still write a new get if whatever, they don't like the way the letters look. It's 100% kosher get b'leishum pikpuk. But the Edom decided, whatever reason, this get, the letters are not so perfectly written, and they want to deliver a beautiful piece, and therefore a masterpiece, they want to make the Sefer write it again, or the Sefer himself feels that he doesn't want to have a something which is not artist doesn't want to have something which is not a masterpiece come out of his hand with a mistake. Talking about the days before modern art, so therefore he's going to have to write a new one. The Pri Chodesh is not a problem because still the Shlichusim is not completed. And he brings a raya to it from the Riyaz and Shilti Gebayrim, and then he continues and he says that what the Rashbat says, the Rashbat that the Beis Yosef brings, that if they wrote and they signed, they were already asu shlichosam. It's talking about when the husband only says kisvu v'chismu. He never said what to know. So then they did not become Eidim for Mesiras HaGet. The same thing, the Rosh, and all the people that the Beis Yosef brings, which all have a shaila whether asu shlichusam or not in certain scenarios, if it's a suffix, if it's a suffix mikama chumras, all these opinions are all talking about kisvu without tenu. If there would be kisvu with tenu, like asu shlichusam until the tenu is fulfilled. And again, this is also one of the big machlekes in kisvu without tenu. What the din? But if they're also eidei mesira, they could write, the sefer could write more, the eidim could sign more until they're comfortable giving, even if it's fully kosher. The Radbaz does not hold like that. The Pri Chodesh says the Radbaz does not hold like that, and he holds that if the get is kosher, even if we told them to know, they could still not write a new get. The Pri Chodesh says the halacha is not like Radbaz. The halacha is, as long as there was, until Tenu is fulfilled, Loi asu shlichusam. But the Pri Chodesh then continues and quotes something else from the Radbaz, that if they gave her a kosher get, the Radbaz says they gave her a kosher get, once then they used to give the get and the wife would hold it. And that was a proof for her to get remarried. And then she lost the get and she wants another get. The Radbaz says you can't write a new get without Rishus Habal. On that the Pri Chodesh says, also argues in the Radbaz, and says, even if the husband tells you to write a new get, you're not allowed to. Because the Eidim are going to be Eidir Sheker. It's also to be made Eidir Sheker. She's already divorced. You can't write such a thing. To prevent all these problems today, the Gittin stay in Bezdin, and usually they're supposed to stay in Bezdin. Sometimes you could buy them in auctions, but that's not the original way that the things were supposed to happen. We don't make Tanaim in Gittin. The Tanaim means a shaila in get. Person should not be hanging and not knowing we should get remarried. I mean, we don't do any Tanaim in Gittin, and later they even don't do Tanaim in Shlichus. It's a machzedek and a few tshuvas. If a Tanai was done b'Shlichus, I get, because Tanai in get was already abolished 400 years ago or more. A Tanai in Shlichus was abolished 200 years ago. Not fully abolished, but it's already discussed in Poskim if it was done, not that it should be done. The Pri Chodesh continues, brings in Tumas Hadeshen, that the reason why you have to say Achi Hei Kosher L'daitechem U'Dasarav HaMesader Heim B'Ksiva V'Heim B'Chsime is because you want that the get could be that the get is going to become possible B'Chsime. The get is fine. Elamai, they took aid, was not a professional, and he botched up, and he didn't write his name. He forgot. He wrote his father's name. Whatever he did, he made a mistake. He wrote whatever he did, the letters or something got messed up over there. And if he writes only Achei Kosher B'Ksive, the get was Kosher B'Ksive, and the Sefer Kras Shlichusin, the husband's not here to make a new appointment. Yeah, that's what the Tumas Hadeshen writes. And the Pri Chodesh comes and says, true what the Tumas Hadeshen writes, but even that I already explained in Siman Kuf Chaf, that Chsime is part of Ksive, Kisvu alone includes V'chismu, and even though he says that, he says, in this case, I agree with the Tumas Hadeshen. And therefore he says, to avoid all problems, don't say B'chsive B'chsime Ben Sinne. He changes it. He says, just say Ad Sheyehei Kosher without any doubt. And that's a global statement that covers everything. And then it could be given, and it could be rewritten, and whatever has to be done to make sure that it's fine. The Get Pashut, as usual, makes a beautiful seder in the sugis over here. It's about 4 or 5 pages long, just on this Sa'if. And first, he starts by a question on the Rambam. The Rambam says that Get Batel Oy Pasol, we say that they did not do their shlichus yet. And he asks, how did the Rambam pull this out of the Gemara? The Gemara is talking about that she had one name, and they misspelled the name. Yeah. Shinui Shem, Shina Shmoi, Shina Shma is Pasal Mid'Oraisa, not Mid'Rabbanan. And therefore, how could they rewrite a new get? How could you say that when it's only Pasal, you can rewrite a new get? Lo Yasser Shel Chusam. The Gemara is talking about Shina Shmoi. Shina Shma. Shina Shma is deraisa, not a derabanan. So only by batal you could do it. But if it's pasul miderabanan but batal mideraisa, if it's pasul miderabanan but kosher mideraisa, it should not be. We should say that also shlichusam. So Taka the Marshach, when he discusses this, he says that the Rambam learned this din from the whole chaspa ba'alma concept, because he says ultimately this is chaspa ba'alma. The Marshach. So therefore, even if it's only pasul midrabanan, only lachatchila, it's still considered a chaspa ba'alma and they didn't do the shlichus. The Lechem Mishnah says that the Rambam learned this from the din of Nevad, not the chaspa ba'alma, the din of Nevad, that it says that it has to come to her hands a get kosher, and over here, even if it's only pasul midrabanan, to her hands it not arrive a get kosher. And the get pasha then says, Bichlal, this kasha that I asked is not so good kasha, because it's not shinui shema. What's shinui shem when you write the wrong name? Over here, the difference between a tes and a nun is a spelling mistake. They changed the spelling from one to another. The other name is not the name of a different woman in town. We're talking about this woman, and this is her name, and you changed one letter in the name, so you made a mistake in the name. That's not a shinui shem, it's a misspelling. And therefore, that's why it was only a psul midrabanan. And he says, the Get Pasha says that's the way that he's medayeket from Rashi. He says the difference between a tes and a nun is a small difference. And that difference is not paisa midaraisa. And therefore, that's why the Gemara had meikare svare that asu shlichusam. Only by derabanan you could have a shayla if asu shlichusam or not. A suffix. If it's batal midaraisa, what's b'chal the have a minute asu shlichusam? Logically, it makes no sense. The Gemara wouldn't even, this whole discussion in Gemara wouldn't come into play if it was batal midaraisa. Obviously, lo asu shlichusam. You wouldn't even have the first opinion. The only way you have a shayla if asu shlichusam or not is when it's pasul midarabanan. When it's pasul midarabanan, you have a shayla asu shlichusam because it's kosher midaraisa. Maybe asu shlichusam, maybe not. And that's the whole discussion in Gemara. So that's why when the Rambam tells you pasul oy batul oy pasul, because batul is clearly lo asu shlichusam. Pasul, that's learned from the Gemara. The only thing you can learn from the Gemara. And he says here, the Rambam also learned this from the din of chaspa ba'alma. And there's no svara to say that you have a chaspa midaraisa and a chaspa midarabanan. Chaspa is chaspa. Piece of clay is a piece of clay. We don't find that there's a difference between a clay which is only clay midarabanan and a clay which is only clay midaraisa. What you think? Right? Now, then he adds another din, the get pasha. This is only if the mistake was a mistake of the sofer or the edim in writing the name. But if the husband lied to the edim and to the sofer about how his name should be written, and then you discover that's a wrong name, then you can't write a new get with a good name. Because we say, this is exactly the shlichus habal. He wanted to fool and mess around with his wife. He wanted her to think that she's getting a get. He wanted to be mitzad her. So he specifically told the Edom, write this name. My name is Kach v'Kach. And it's not really his name. And he knew that was going to do it. And the moment they gave her a get with the wrong name, they were mekayim his shlichus to mess her over. So therefore, for sure, also shlichusim. So you have to get you have to do it. And he brings it at Baz. That if it's kosher midaraisa but pasul midrabanan, you cannot write a new get, and we already said the Pri Chodesh disagrees with it, and Bichlal most disagree with this notion. Bichlal today is not relevant because today you always ask to get. Very rarely do you have a shayla psam agen that you hopped in the airport one day on the way and you appointed and you know he's going to change his mind. That maybe you're going to have this shayla. Usually just you get the person to write a new get. That's Pri Chodesh. That's get Pashat Sifkotan Aleph, Sifkotan Gimel. The get Pashat talks about when it's not lost, and it's kosher even midrabanan, and you have Safek mitzat Kama Chumris, and over there we say that also Shlichusam. And therefore, if they're going to write a second get only because Kama Chumris that they have no Makrim in the Torah, then what's going to be the Chaspa, the second get? Because that get had no minui whatsoever. Yeah, so now he says, therefore you have to get the husband to appoint again. If the husband is not here and it's a Makim Igun, he says, give the first get. But if it's because it's kosher, midrabanan, it's only a shaila of Kama Chumras. If the husband is available, and it's not a Makim, or even if it's the husband is not available right now, but it's not a Makim Igun, he's available, he will come in a few days or a few weeks, it's not considered a Makim Igun, then you bring the husband back and let him give another get. Let him appoint another get. In Seif Kot and Daled, the get Pashut comes now and goes to a more general question. Why Bechlal do we even have a suffix on Asu Shlichusim or not? Why do Bechlal say that in such a scenario of Machmas Kama Chumris, we say Asu Shlichusim? At the end of the day, the get was not given to the wife yet. The Sofer and the Edom have it in their hands. These Sofer and Edom are makpid on these Chumras. For them, they were not mekayim the shluchas yet. More so, if the get would get lost, they would be able to write a new get. More so, even if they were a fully kosher get and just want to hold it back, and the Sefer decided this is such a beautiful get, I want to keep it in my collection so I have it to hang it up on my wall or whatever it is, or to practice from it, and I'm going to write a new get for her, they could still write a new get. And he says that's what the Riyaz says in Shiltei Gibayrim, which is also in the Pri Chodosh. And therefore he says, based on this Riyaz, he doesn't even understand Tosfos and the Rosh and everybody else who holds that when you have a suffix because of a chumrah, it's a suffix if Asu Shlichusim or not. There's no suffix whatsoever. The get wasn't given to her. There's no suffix if Asu Shlichusim or not. Even if they only have a suffix mitzat Kama Chumras, now that they...
Who says they become holy?
Who
says they hold like young?
He says it doesn't make sense otherwise, because they get, if you have Nevad, by Nevad, they could have written a new one. So that's the whole point. Yeah. So therefore he says that what are we talking about over here? That it became a suffix. It's when the Sofer and the Edom hold that it is good. And the Ravoid comes and creates problems. Or somebody else. Sitting at the get, and he says, I don't like the way this is written. That's a shayla, creates a shayla. So then it's a problem. Because then for them, they also shluchusam. They get this kosher without any suffix. But since the husband says l'rav v'chulu v'chulu, so now it becomes a shayla because kamas fekas becomes a shayla whether also shluchusim or not. That's when you need a new appointment. Yeah, so therefore he says if the Sofer and the Edom themselves are uncomfortable with giving the get, then they for sure could give a new get. That's how the get Pashut explains.
Then if you didn't if the husband didn't say anything, you just give her a get, she'd be kosher.
If the Sefer and Edom give the get, it's kosher because for them it's kosher.
Yeah.
But he says, who creates the Sfekas over here? He says the Sfekas were only created by an external person.
So Taisa should pass me that we shouldn't care about it. Say like, Taisa, why make a t'nai? If you make a problem, don't.
No t'nai. You don't know what's going to be down the line. You don't know if it's going to be that the letter is touching another letter. And you're megumgum if this is a chibur or not. Yeah. And the whole idea of mukaf kvil, that each letter can't be any negiyas, is only a chumrah, which we follow. So it's mekama chumras. Yeah. So if the Sefer would hold that it's totally fine, he doesn't see any gear, he has better eyesight, so then it wouldn't be a problem. For him, then it becomes a suffix if also shlichusim or not. Because for the Sefer, he was already mekayim shlichus. The Rav is not comfortable giving it, so therefore it becomes a suffix. But if the Sefer himself says he has a suffix, if it's also shlichusim or not, that's fine. Then he continues and he says another different reason, similar to the Bri Chadash. All these paiskim that say that's only talking about kisvu v'chismu without to know, and therefore kasvu v'chasmu l'shitasam, it's totally fine and it's kosher. Elamai, they have a gimgum because of kama chumris, so therefore we say also shlichusam. But if the suffix is there and he told them to know and they didn't give it to her yet, but he says, that like the Pri Chadash, he says, from the Paiskim it says that it's not so. Rather, Kisvu Chismu Tenu becomes like two separate shlichusin. One shlichus is Ksiva Vachsime. One shlichus is Nesine. One is about the document. One is about the delivery. Two separate things. So therefore, even if he tells him Kisvu Chismu Tenu, he essentially divided the whole, he gave him two shlichus in one sentence. But he says that's how these paiskim must have held. But again, this doesn't fit with the Gemara of Nevad, because Nevad is after Ksiva V'chsime. And if it will be a separate shlichus, so kvar also shlichusam. So you need a new minui for Ksiva V'chsime. So therefore, he says no, from the Gemara that says by Nevad, we must say that Kisvu V'chismu Tnu is one long shlichus, and they could write another get. And this is even stronger from Nevad. Well, what's Nevad? Nevad doesn't mean it got burnt. Nevad means I misplaced it. The get is kosher. It exists. Could be tomorrow I'm going to find the get. You can still go and write a new get. So therefore here also, he says, ultimately for the Sefer, if the Sefer and the Eidim have Eze Gimgum and they didn't give it yet, they could write a new get. Then he says, maybe the Gemara is talking about Nevad or Nisraf when it's not in their hands anymore. And therefore, he says, if the Eidim went ahead, and because they had a doubt, they went and they burnt the get, they could write a new get. Intentionally go and burn the get, they could write a new get. And he says, all the paiskim will be moide, that if the guy goes, if the Eidim go and intentionally, deliberately destroy the get, they could write a new get, if it's machmas gimgum. And it's like the Pri Chadash. The only time you have a shaila if the get is be'en. Then you have a chashash, according to Tosfos and everybody else. That is essentially the summary of the get pashut. Now I'm going to move on to the Teres Gitin, then we're going to go to the Tzemach Tzedek. Teres Gitin says like this in Biurim Sifkot and Aleph. Nevad is only when they appoint them for Kisvu v'chismu tenu. When that by Nevad, when you could write a new get, is only by Kisvu v'chismu tenu, which we already know from before. We already know this. We learned it in other people. Why? Because the shlichus was not complete. She didn't get a get yet. But if he goes to the Sefer and says, "You're right," and he goes to the Eidim and says, "You sign," and he goes to the Shliach and says, "You give," each one gave independent shlichus, then when the Sefer finishes writing, he did his job. When the Eidim, he can't write another one. If it got lost, he can't write another one. And he says, he brings this from the Get Pashat, the Mashmos of the Get Pashat. And therefore, they should say, he should tell all of them, everybody's there together, the whole minu should be together to all the parties in one time. That's how we do it today. Also, the whole minu is read. It's not, even though he appoints afterwards each one to do their role, but all the appointments are done to all of them together, and that way, if there is any issue, they could still be fixed afterwards, even though the chatchila we still look to get a new meaning. And the Teres Gitin also brings what we already spoke. Also, the next thing from the get pashut, that if the husband tricked the Sefer and the Adam to write a different name, they can't write another get. And the Teres Gitin then comes and moves to the next topic. And Biurim Sifkotan Beis, the next thing from the get pashut. The next thing that one of the things that the get pashut mentioned is that when you have a get pasul, the get pashut says if you give a get pasul, that means the ksiva is pasul midirabanan, but if you gave a get pasul, then the sin is pasul midiraisa. And therefore we don't say also shlichusam until the end of the nesina. That's the logic of the get pashut. The logic of the get pashut is, if you don't finish giving a get with a kosher nesina, there's no shlichus, your shlichus was not fulfilled midiraisa, even though the get is only pasul midirabanan. And this get that was given, written and signed, was kosher midiraisa, but the giving was not kosher midiraisa because they gave a get pasul. And this Teres Gitin says it doesn't make any sense. He says, this Teres, what I just said now, the get pashut, the get pashut. So the Teres Gitin over here doesn't like it. In another place, in a different siman he does, but in this siman he doesn't. There's a still in the Teres Gitin which it's a stiller from here to Kuf Chafei. Well, I'm not going to get into it now. And he says over here, based on this, the get pashut says, and based on this get pashut, the Teres Gitin says that if the husband says Achie kosher b'loishum pikpuk, and then appeared some kind of pikpuk, and they gave it to her, you're also going to say that it's possible that the nesina was pasul midiraisa. This makes no sense. No posek wrote that when a get is only possible, when a get has a pikpuk, and then a nesina was done afterwards, that the nesina is pasul midiraisa. And therefore he says that this logic of the get pashut, or he says that the idea of shlichus by a get is not that the husband tells them, you are shluchim to deliver this get to my wife, to deliver to her a kosher get b'loishum pikpuk, and if not, you're not shluchim. That's not what he says. The husband, when he says, deliver a get, his idea is, you are like me, and you are shluchim until a kosher get gets to your hand. Whatever happens between now and then is up to you. So therefore, if a get kosher did not come to her hands, she is not, if a get kosher did not come to her hands, b'loishum pikpuk, you're still like me, and you could make a new get, just like a husband could. That means your power of attorney doesn't expire. So the yesod of shluchas is not that you have a limited power of attorney which expires when asu shluchusam. No, your power of attorney remains. You're like me, mamish like me, until you fulfill this mission. At that point, you're ois me. And he says, therefore, if the person gave a get pasul, if the husband would give a get pasul, she would be megureshes midiraisa, right? If the Adam give a get, if the shliach halacha gives a get pasul, she's also megureshes midiraisa, but she's not megureshes midirabanan. And the husband would want that you should get a get that she should be megureshes. So therefore, the same way the shluchim also, these Adam and Sefer and then shliach halacha, their role is the same as the husband's. Then the Teres Gitin over there in the same Sifkotan says that if you're going to look in Chayshim Mishpat Siman Memtes, Sifkotan Vav, you're going to see over there the Shach and Siman Memtes and Chayshim Mishpat Sifkotan Vav, that when you have a suffix, we say, Im Asur Shlichusam or not, we say Asur Shlichusam, and then he goes into a discussion about that. I'm not going to get into it now, and then he concludes, the Teres Gitin concludes, if it's Nevad, if they wrote a second get, yeah, because of Nevad, you're allowed to write a second get. And then they came and they found the first get. they could choose to use whichever get they want to give to her. There's no shaila of Breira. But he says maybe the second one is the second one ultimately is still less. It's based on the nevad that you had at Tzivui. So he says really you could use both, either or. But it's much better to use the first one. And then the Teres Gitin and Biurim Sifkotten Hey comes and says, brings a discussion about if could the Eidim actually go ahead and destroy it themselves. And he says if they have a suffix, Mikama Chumras, the Shulchan Aruch says that they have to get a new tzivui. He says, ask a question, l'chayre they could have ripped it up themselves and write a new one, because the same as Ned, then it would have been like Nevad. And he turns Gitin and says, no, the Eidim can't go ahead and rip it, because by them ripping the get, they are canceling their shlichus. Which implies that if this person messes it up, the Eidim then go ahead and they rip the get, which is Mekamas Fekis, or the Sofer rips up the get because of Kamas Fekis, it puts in question their whole shlichus. And it's mashma that they would need a new get, a new minui, before doing it. Only by nevad me'atzmoi, if it got lost by itself, or it got ripped, but not by the Eidim or the Sofer, and not by their knowledge, that means they didn't tell them to go rip it up, then by nevad, then in such a case, they could write a new one if it's nevad. And that's why by gimgum they can't go ahead and rip it up. Not like the Pri Chadash and the get pashat is not clear what he holds about that. The shaila is if the Rav could actually do it or not. Okay, now let's move into the Tzemach Tzedeks. I'm going to give you summaries of the Tzemach Tzedeks over here. At Tshuve, Reish Tzadik Beis, Siman Reish Tzadik Beis, Neven Oezer, Ois Hey, and Weiter. Hey, Vav Zayin Chestas. I'm going to give you very short. Tzemach Tzedek, Siman Reish Tzadik Beis. Ois Hey, and Weiter. Over there, the case was that the Rav ripped up the get because of a shayah, because the Rav Mesade. And the Tzemach Tzedek goes into the whole arichus. If it was ripped by somebody who is not the husband, is that considered like he was mevatel the get or not? He brings what the Maras son writes in Siman Lamed, that the Maras son discusses the shit of the Rashba. The Rashba holds that ripping a get passes the get. And the Maras son explains it in two ways, why the Rashba holds that way. Which you could, to use the yeshivish terminology, it's a gavra chefze. Is the ripping, why does it make it possible? Is the ripping in din, in gavra, that when the husband rips it, and he has in mind to rip it, his action shows that he wants to completely cancel the get. But when somebody else rips it, who is not the husband, or not by his approval, then this action doesn't cancel the get. Or, it's a hefta question. A ripped get is not a get. If you make a rip, a kra bezdin, which is done in the toiref, you make the X, shasi ve'erev, where the toiref is. And that shows that the shtar is bottle. That means that when you see a ripped up get, it's a raya that it got cancelled. And therefore, if a get got ripped up by itself, the get also got bottled by itself. And it became chaspa be'alma, like a cheres.
The Rash is not on in the case of shlichus?
Huh?
The Rash is not on in the case of shlichus?
No, it's talking about if the Adam ripped it before.
No, that he made the shlichus?
They're always, the Adam are shluchim to sign on the get. And the Maras, son of there, continues that it seems like the Rashba holds that if there is a kra bezdin made by the bezdin or by the husband a rip, then it becomes batal. Because the action of ripping is not what causes the bittul of the get. Like the gavra part, the action of ripping is not what causes the bittul of the get. It's the intention behind the action. The form of the ripping, if you have a kra bezdin, a rip on the toiref, that shows that the kavanah of the husband. That means he explains the Rashba, he says, really it's a gavra. It's based on the intention of the husband. But when you have a kra bezdin done by the Rav Mesada, this shows that the husband, that's what he wanted to do. Or if the husband ripped it and you know that he ripped it with this intention. But if it got ripped unintentionally, and you know it got ripped unintentionally, you could go ahead and give this get with Eidem Mesira. Because the husband did not want to, if the husband just grabbed the get because he wanted to see something in it and by mistake he ripped it, doesn't make the get puzzle. And the Marasasan concludes, could be that if it's known by Eidim that it got ripped unintentionally, then even if it's kra bezdin in the toiref, it's still not possible. That's the Marasasan. The Tzemach Tzedek then continues in Oisvav. I'm summarizing the Tzemach Tzedek. According to the Marasasan, if it's ripped by other people, it's not batal. Why? According to the first opinion, the first svara in the Marasasan. Why? Yeah, they can't be mevatel get without the rotzen of the Baal. So Tzemach Tzedek goes into the whole discussion and says, we have a machlekes if could a person be oyser davar she'eino shaloi? If a person goes and then there's whether he's makdish, whether he does something to somebody else's, he's oyser davar she'eino shaloi, and there's a machlekes. The ma'aseh the halacha is the majority of poskim hold that Adam is oyser davar she'eino shaloi, and it's chayav in his zakim after, it's chayav for the moment that he was mazik. And the Tzemach Tzedek then says, L'maisa, there are still opinions which hold that Adam einay oyser davar she'eino shaloi. That he cannot make something osir. And therefore, there's a svara to say that if the bezdin ripped up the get without the husband's approval, the get is not batal. And the Tzemach Tzedek gives you a gavaldik interesting idea over here. When a bezdin rips up the get, they don't have the intention to mevatel the get. What's the reason for ripping up the get? There's three reasons for ripping up the get. First, they're written in three reasons. First of all, she should not be able to be goyve ksuba 2 times. So the rip shows that that's when they make today. We make the rip in the ksuba. And they get rip in the get shouldn't be true because they get the ksuba by the get. Second of all, there was a time there was a gzeira that they couldn't do, so they would rip up the get.
What? What?
A gzeira.
What?
Gzeira about gitin. So they would rip it up in such a way, and that would be a siman for them. And if the Romans would catch them, they would tell them this get has no validity because it's ripped. We didn't do Jewish divorces, or maybe later after the Romans. I don't know which anti-Semites were on our case then. Or so the husband shouldn't come afterwards, and when the get is if the get is in one piece, the husband give him ma'ared and says this get is pasul, this get is ashayla. Like this, when it's ripped, kra bezdin, it proves that the bezdin reviewed it, it's kosher, and they gave it to her. That's the reason why a bezdin rips up the get. All of this has nothing to do with bittul get. The get is never batal. So when a bezdin rips up a get, they don't have the intention of being mevatel it, even if they do it midas habal. Halachas kam v'kam v'do it shalem midas habal. And therefore, it's not even Adam oyser davar she'eino shaloi. Because over there is a ma'aseh gomer. Over here it's not a ma'aseh gomer of bittul. There's no action of bittul aget. The intention of the bezdin is not for bittul aget, it's for something else. But in Oizayin he says ultimately this is only if the bezdin ripped up the toifus. But if it's by a toiref, the point if the bezdin, kra bezdin is by the toiref, it's hard to say that it's mutter. Because ultimately they did a ma'aseh in the guf aget. The toifus is not guf aget. Toiref is guf aget. So by toifus we say there was no intention to mevatel the get. By toiref we say there might be intention to mevatel the get. And the Tzemach Tzedek then continues, it says, ultimately, if the Rav HaMesader rips it, there is a svara to say that he's doing it midas habal. And then there's a svara to say that the husband was the one who was mevatel. But the Tzemach Tzedek concludes that if it was ripped by the Rav HaMesader and not by the husband, and it was ripped only in the toifus and not in the toiref, so it's two svaras to be mekel, then you shouldn't be machmer. That was the din in the shaila over there. But if it's in the toiref, or if the husband ripped it, one of the two, then you have a problem, and you can't basically don't attach two chumras one on top of another. Elamai, he concludes in Ois Ches that ultimately, being that there is a kra bezdin on it, because in that case it was nikra by the bezdin, but it was in the taifa. Since there is a kra bezdin, you must have Eidem Mesira when the get is given.
What were the two places? What were the two conditions of Machshir? What were the two conditions of Machshir?
B'toifes, not b'toiref, and not by the hands of the husband. Even if it's a Rav HaMesader, it's still fine. In Ois Tes, he obviously reminds you that this whole thing is based on the first opinion in Maras HaSon, that it's a din in the, I call it Gavra and Chefza, we'll continue with that. That the kriya, that the action of ripping is not was mevatel, but according to the second opinion, that the get that is ripped is in essence bottle, then even if it got ripped by unintentionally, by itself, got stuck fell on a knife or something, the get is still bottle. The maskana, that's a Tzemach Tzedek pasuk like the first opinion, that it's not bottle if it was ripped in the toifus, even through the Rav HaMesader, as long as it wasn't done from the husband's, with the husband's intention. That is Siman Reish Tzadik Beis. Siman Reish Samaches in the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek discusses, it's a long tshuva, which continues into Reish Samachtes and Reish Ayin, back and forth about this גיטין story, that the husband appointed the Sefer to write a get. Before the chsime, the Mesader get really got on the nerves of the husband. The husband got so mad and said, "Nishtokin get. Ich gib nit kein get, afilu va 500 rubel." That's a quote, story from the Tzemach Tzedek, Siman Reish Samaches. He was so mad, he said, "I'm not going to give a get, nishtokin get, I'm not giving a get, even if you pay me. Even if I get paid." And then they calmed him down, and he says, "Let it be a get." But he didn't do the whole minuyim from new. And the get was signed, and everything was done properly. And then he actually went and gave the get to the shliach to deliver to his wife. And it's a mokim igun because his husband was a mummer. A mummer, meshumad. It's a Tzemach Tzedek says, first the Tzemach Tzedek explains why when the husband says nishtokin get, it's not considered bitul a get that was already written, or bitul shlichus of the Edom. All it does is, it's mevatel the shliach lo ilacha. That's what Tzemach Tzedek explains, goes at length to explain this yesod. Nishtokin get, is not mevatel the get, is not mevatel the Edom. In Ois Hey he says, if the husband would say, but the husband after saying nishtokin get, what did the husband say? Ich gib nicht kein get afilu for 500 rubles. So when he says, ich gib nit, I'm not giving, that includes everything. The get, the ksive, the chsime, the get that was written, the Edom which didn't sign yet. Why? Because gib nit is, I'm not giving. Giving is tnu. The Gemara in Perikis Kabel says that when someone says tnu get leishti, yichtavu v'yitnu. That means that tnu is kailo both. So that means tnu by itself is kailo ksive and a sinner. And therefore, when we say Gibish can get, he included everything. The also. Elamai, it's not enough to mevatel the ksiva because the ksiva already happened. He got mad between the ksiva and the chsima. So if you would then go and reappoint the Eidich Sime and reappoint the Shliach, then there's no Shaila B'chal in the get that was already written. Yeah, and this is what Tzemach Tzedek explains in Ois Vav. In Ois Zayin, he explains that when the Pri Chodosh says, because this Yesod, the Tnuz, includes also Ksiv and the sins from the Pri Chodosh. He says, it's only if you have no other way of explaining it. Pri Chodesh Yesod is, he says that the Pri Chodesh Yesod is that Tnu includes Ksiva and Chsime and Nesine only when there is no other way of explaining Tnu. But when there's no reason to force it into Tnu, you don't have to. So therefore, if a person just says Tnu, we say he must have included Ksiva, Chsime, and Nesine. But over here, where each one of them was spelled out by him, was expressed by him, so then Tnu can't include the Ksiva, because the Ksiva already happened. So when he says Ich gibnit can get, it only refers to whatever is left of the process, the Nesine and the Chsime. So that's a question of Tzemach Tzedek. When it comes to Ois Yud Aleph, he says that he comes and he tells you we have a problem. Because in the story there was no nu minui, only the husband calmed down, and maybe there will be a need for a new tzivui. Maybe it's not enough just for him calming down, and therefore he brings the tashbetz that when the husband appoints a sefer in front of Adam, that he should write the kosher get. The umdana is that includes also chsimas Adam. That's what the tashbetz says, that when a sefer is appointed just with kisvu in front of Adam, the kisvu also includes the chismo of the Adam. Just like a shchiv mela, kisvu without no works by a shchiv mela. And therefore Tzemach Tzedek says, he says to be mekel, being that the bitul was not a clear bitul, it was not a clear gilui das, he just says nishtok can get, he didn't say ich bin mevatel the get, ich bin mevatel the shlichus. So therefore, the bittul of the bittul doesn't have to be clearly stated, ich bin memana. So just like nishtok can get, when he calms down and says farana get, is also good. The same Kabbalah Kachpolta is Peshas or Peshahita, whichever thing you want to compare it to, whichever one of these ideas.
What did Tashbetz say?
Tashbetz says that in Tashbetz is that the kisvu also includes Chsima Seidim. The Tzemach Tzedek then continues and says that being that Tnu by itself includes Ksiva and Chsima, because you can't give a get without writing and signing it, like we said before. So therefore, when he got calmed down and he said, okay, give a get, it re-includes in it the Ksiva and the Chsima and the Nesina, which didn't have, the Ksiva which happened and the Chsima and the Nesina which didn't happen, even though he didn't clearly state it. The same way, Tnu includes Ksiva and Chsima for the Minui. Tnu, give a get, also includes Chsima and Eidim for afterwards. And therefore, when they wrote and signed the get afterwards, without a nu minu, just because he calmed down and said, go ahead with the get, it works. That is what he says in Siman Reish Samaches. You look in Reish Samachtes and in the Eshayin, Tzemach Tzedek already changes it, that maybe the remizah of changing his mind back doesn't really work. But he didn't. But the Tzemach Tzedek L'maaseh was still mekel. And if you're going to look in Siman Reish Pei Aleph, I'm not going to get into it now. We're just telling you to look over there. There's discussion if a shliach could cancel his own shlichus. If a shliach that got the minui to deliver the get, and then he decides himself he doesn't want to do it, could he change it? Could he change his mind or not? I'm not going to get into it now. And if you're going to look in, I'm just telling you where to look, in Siman Kuf Samach Daled, another story of that has a yesod for this, and also we get to I want to conclude. I can't get into this to Tzemach Tzedek. I might get into it at a different time. Shas Hashuvas Chavatzelas Hasharon Tanina Siman Ayin Tes Tanyana Siman Ayin Tes, a get which was written and signed, and there was a tzivui abal, and the shliach was supposed to send it to a second shliach, and it was sent by mail, and the get got lost, and the Rav Ha'ir appointed a new aide and a new shliach and everything without the yedias abal, and the Rav who asked the question says, I don't even understand how they pulled it off, because the Sefer and Edom already did their shlichus and they already gave it to the shliach, and the Rav Ha'ir told that it's the Rav Ha'ir said that's Zachin L'Adam Shloi Befonim, you can get away with it. And the Chavatzelas Hasharon says because the husband used the words Kenston Alsvos Medarf regarding the get, that includes writing a new get, appointing everything, whatever it has to do. And therefore, they're able to write a new get. But if they wouldn't use the Lashon Alsvos Medarf, a general Lashon, then it would be a problem. And that fits with what I told you from the Tzemach Tzedek also. When you have general Lashonis, this also fits with what the Pri Chadash says, when you have general Lashonis, you're much better off than doing a whole complicated, long minui, which then could create a shaila where you're holding.